The Daily Derech. We are walking the path of holiness.
Hello, everybody. This is Rabbi Marcus Rubenstein. Welcome to the Daily Derech, a special project of exploring Judaism, the United Synagogue of Conservative Judaism, the Rabbinical Assembly, and Temple of Aaron. Today is the third day after Shabbat Kodesh, the 5th of Elul, 5786, corresponding in the secular calendar to Tuesday, August 18th, 2026. We will read Parashat Ki Teitze this coming Shabbat. Let's begin. Parashah. Let's read the third aliyah for Parashat Ki Teitze in the triennial Torah cycle. The verses we'll be looking at today are chapter 21, verse 18 through 21, the famous example of the ben sorer or moreh, or the wayward and defiant son. If a man has a wayward and defiant son who does not need his father or mother and does not heed his father or mother and does not obey them after they discipline him, his father and mother shall take hold of him and bring him out to the elders of the town at the public place of his community. They shall say to the elders of his town, "This son of ours is disloyal and defiant. He does not heed us. He is a glutton and a drunkard." Thereupon the people of his town shall stone him to death. Thus you will sweep out evil from your midst. All Israel will hear and be afraid. A very harsh couple of verses, especially in the way we think of modern parenting today. We think in horror of parents who would bring their child and bring their son into such a situation and punish him in such a way for his bad behavior. Very, very challenging set of verses. In the end, I think it's important, though, to try to determine what does this say about Jewish values and what does Judaism actually value from a biblical sense. With the prior knowledge, I think that's really important that when you actually look at the Talmud and the way that this is understood legally in rabbinic understanding, is this basically is like sort of loopholed out of existence. There really are no communities that do this, or and so we're not really talking about a practical legal discussion here anymore. And so I think there is a way to talk about this theoretically, and we're going to try to do that today to try to understand the values that may come out of this. Not saying that this is a perfect mitzvah. This is certainly a difficult one to understand, and I have certainly not come to a full understanding of it yet. So let's take a look at what the Ramban says. The Ramban's usually great for these things. Let's take a look at Nachmanides. He says, "A stubborn and rebellious son. In the opinion of our rabbis, he is not a minor, for a minor is not subject to any public punishments ordained by the Torah or to the observance of any commandments," right? So Ramban first says anybody in the age of minority cannot possibly be subject to these commandments because they are not liable for mitzvot, right? That's the whole entire idea of being a minor. So how can they be punished for something they're not liable for yet? Rather, this verse applies to a boy who has grown 2 pubic hairs, signifying puberty, right? That's just the rabbinic sign for puberty. So now that once a boy is in puberty, they are now subject to the laws prescribed by the Torah. They are now technically bar mitzvah, right? So now he is liable to 2 punishments. The first, because he dishonors his father and his mother and rebels against them. And the second, because he is a glutton and a drunkard, transgressing that which we have been commanded. Ye shall be holy. So the Ramban signifies that there are 2 particular transgressions that this new bar mitzvah makes. Number one, that he doesn't listen to his parents, right? So it's actually a mitzvah to listen to what your parents says, and of course there's a there's a line there in terms of if your parents are telling you to violate the Torah or something else bad, okay, there might be reason not to listen to them, but for the most part, there is a Torah level requirement to listen to what your parents say. Okay. And obviously cases, there are many, many cases with this that are very, very complicated and should be brought to a rabbi who understands these laws very clearly and has studied them intensely. But the second problem is a very Ramban issue, is there's a general mitzvah on the whole entire Jewish community to be kiddushim to you, that everyone should be holy. And according to Ramban's understanding of what it means to be holy, it means to stay away from doing too much of the permitted things. He actually outlines this in Parashat Kedoshim of what this means. And so we know, according to the Talmud, that one of the stubborn and rebellious things that he's doing is that he's a glutton, he's a drunkard, he is drinking, eating too much. And so because he's doing too much of the enjoyable things and doesn't have the values and is not centering his life around the values of Judaism, therefore he becomes this ben usorer, or moreh, the son who is rebellious. So those are the two issues for the Ramban that he designates here. But I think the bigger issue that the Ramban eventually comes to is the fact that, like, how can you punish? None of these are actually punishable by death. Really, they're not actually capital crimes. So then why is the person being killed? And the reason why, at least according to the Ramban, is these are crimes that will certainly lead to the really bad capital crimes. Right? And therefore, they should be killed before they transgress those crimes themselves. The reason being, and this might seem unfair at first, because, well, why should someone be punished before they even do a crime? They should at least have to do it, in sort of the American understanding of justice. But for a Jewish understanding of justice, there is an olam haba. There's a world to come. And so it's better for a person to die and not have committed the sins than to have to die after they committed the sin. And if you implicitly accept the assumption that they will commit this really capital crime eventually, it is actually helping them out to kill them before they do the crime. And obviously it prevents the harm that the crime would have caused to the person in a more modern sense. But I think, just zooming out for a second, because none of this is practical anymore, thank God, in some ways, and actually in most ways, I think there is something beautiful to learn from this, though, that as a human being, we should, the reason that we should be in this world, right? What most matters is that we can do good, is that we're capable of doing good, that we're capable of centering our values in our life around mitzvot, around Torah, around values, around things that are good and doing good, right? There isn't as much in Judaism a value of being necessarily kept alive if you're not doing good, if you're not living a life centered around values, and if you're certainly going to be a person who's going to commit bad and do evil, right? This person is certainly not valued. I think that's different in some ways than the modern conception of, like, every human being is, like, equally valued because they're a human being. I don't know if that's really the case in Judaism in the same way. Jews are valued for doing good, for living a good life, living a life that is productive, and serving Hashem, doing good in the world, but not necessarily in the other way. And of course, I don't think that means that you should kill this person, God forbid. But I do think that Judaism definitely believes in a meritocracy of, like, people who do good and center their lives around mitzvot and values, right, should be honored and should be prized. And it's not that everyone is equal in this way, and life can be really bad for somebody who does and centers their life around evil and nihilism. Living itself is not a good thing. Because they will continue to do transgressions, they will continue to hurt people, and they will continue to do bad. And so I think what this is saying is really our values, how we live our lives, how we choose to do good within our lives is the most important thing we can do in our lives, not how many years we live, or if we're alive in general, but what we do with that life. And I think that, at least, is a powerful idea. Let's move on to the Rambam, halacha. We'll continue in the laws of prayer. Today we're going to start the 6th chapter of the laws of prayer. And the 6th chapter begins like this. A person is forbidden to walk behind a synagogue at the time that the congregation is praying, unless he is carrying a burden or there are two entrances to the synagogue on different sides. Okay, I know it says behind the synagogue. I think what it means here is actually at the entrance of the synagogue, because if you think of a synagogue that the front is the Aron Kodesh, is the ark, right, then you would enter through the back, right? So what it's really saying is it's forbidden to walk in front of an entrance of a synagogue while the congregation is praying. And because what it will look like then is that you don't care, right? That you just don't really want to be part of the community, that you don't, this is not important to you. Technically, if you walk past the synagogue, you should go in and pray and join the community, because that obviously is a value to always be part of the community, especially in prayer. Now, obviously, the Rambam says here, unless he is carrying a burden or there are two entrances to the synagogue on different sides, right? So if you're carrying a burden, right, obviously people would then say, oh, he's doing his work, or he has something he has to do, and he has to relieve himself of this burden before obviously davening, or that there are two entrances that, maybe he's going into the second entrance. So that's going to be important. It's going to be important, and I think what's important is specifically about this, what the Rambam is telling us here, is this is a marit ayin issue, right? This is something where other people are going to look at what the person is doing and assume that they don't care, and that's what's important here. It's not actually assumed of the intention of the person here is not what really matters, and I think that's an important concept within Judaism, right? Very different than the society in which we live in, which is all about intention and authenticity, and here it really is it's not that those things are not important, but here what really is important is how your actions seem or are conveyed or seen by the people around you, and what it's showing up like is like, look, this person doesn't really care about God, doesn't care about the community, and those things are extremely important for Torah, for Talmud, within the Jewish value structure. So very important. In the latter instance, anyone who sees him would presume that perhaps he is planning to enter the synagogue through the other entrance, right? That's about the second entrance. Similarly, if there are two synagogues in the city, a person seeing him would say that perhaps he's going to his usual synagogue. Okay, right? So any city that has multiple synagogues, it is permitted to walk in front of the entrance while the people are praying. Also, if one is wearing tefillin on his head, which was more popular or more of a custom during the time of our rabbis when they would wear tefillin all day long, he is permitted to pass a synagogue even without any of these conditions, since the tefillin indicate that he is a person who is seriously interested in the performance of mitzvot and not one to refrain from prayer. So we see here now what's really important is that each person walking in a Jewish community looks as though they are, at least is giving out the non-direct communication that they care about mitzvot, they care about the community, they care about the community's values and Judaism and everything like this. This I think shows us that really to be in a Jewish community, one thing that's important is to live a life where even not just our direct actions, our intentional actions, but even our unintentional actions, what our clothing communicate, how we move our bodies, that they communicate the values of the community, they communicate the values of Torah and Judaism, and this is a very essential thing, and something to watch out even before our intention is true, and we can authentically represent those values maybe within. It might be a good step to actually represent those values in the exterior first, right? Why? Because then you are, not following. You're at least trying to convey or communicate or support the values of the community and the values of the Torah, even before you can literally get your heart behind it, or before you can actually get your heart behind it first. I know this sounds strange at first, but this probably is more in line with Jewish values, especially as we see in the Rambam here. Pirkei Avot. Let's continue on with the first Mishnah. Today is Tuesday, so we'll be looking at Rabbeinu Yonah and his commentary on the Mishnah of the week. So let's take a look. So just to remind us what the Mishnah is, the men of the Great Assembly, they said three things: be patient in the administration of justice, mitunim badin, be deliberate in justice, and raise many disciples, and marbim b'talmidim, and make a fence around the Torah, sayag la Torah. So let's take a look at what Rabbeinu Yonah says. So first of all, be deliberate in judgment. Rabbeinu Yonah says something very similar to the Rambam, at least at first, right? That, it's really important to make to be slow in judgment, so as not to make a mistake, right? Because new information might come, everything like that. Everything we've said before with Rashi and Rambam, which is really, really important, right? Just not to make a mistake, as we've been talking about. But then he goes one step further, and he actually says that the person who is quick in judgment is actually called a sinner, is actually called a transgressor. Even if they were right in the end, they still are considered a transgressing because of not hesitating, not thinking, because they're living in a world where they believe that they won't make an error, or that person won't make an error. But rather, everyone should understand that and live in a possible state that error is found in all people, including oneself. So extremely, extremely important, and it's considered then, and as obviously any mistake that a person makes or judge makes in this reason is going to be considered zadon, or is going to be considered intentional, because they did not hesitate, and they did not think, and they did not be a little bit hesitant in coming to judgment. Look, Jewish law is very, very difficult. It's very complicated. It's easy to make an error when you're thinking very quickly, even when you see things come up. And I think that having this lahatchila, right, and having this spirit right in the beginning from the outset is an important judgment in how Jewish law works and how a judge should act, and look, how any person should make whenever they're judging someone else, basically in any situation they find themselves. So very important here. So he also says be deliberate in judgment can also mean the reason why we are so careful here, and here's something very new, is that we're actually the partner with God in creating the world around us. We are our partner with God when we do justice, when we try to create a just statement or make something just, or fix a situation that is unjust, where someone is being oppressed and some wrong is happening. We're actually doing God's work in this world, and so therefore we should have great respect for it and do it slowly and hesitantly and correctly, since this truly is a pillar of the Torah and a pillar of what God put us in the world for. So therefore we should obviously do it slowly, do it with great respect and importance, and of course be deliberate in judgment, as the Mishnah says. The Mishnah also says, raise up many disciples. Here, Rabbeinu Yonah brings the famous debate between Hillel and Shammai here. Shammai believed that we should only teach students who are fit, modest, proper, and who fear Hashem, right? So from the outset, these students have good moral characteristics and a good moral composition, and only those people should be taught Torah. On the other hand, Beit Hillel thought anybody should be taught, and you should teach as many people as possible, sort of a more egalitarian understanding of teaching Torah, and that you just teach as much as you possibly can, and eventually, you never know which student is going to succeed in the end and mature in Torah and be able to teach it themselves and pass it to the next generation. So therefore, you should teach it to as many people. Beit Hillel ends up winning this debate within the sages. There's this famous story about Rabban Gamliel about this, who was originally a student of Beit Shammai and is shown to be wrong in what he does. But I think this idea of Beit Shammai still exists, that a student of Torah should have certain, from the outset, moral composition, fear of Hashem, honesty, modest, someone who wants to act according to the halacha. These things are all really important. But in the end, like after the fact, we go according to Hillel, that we really do teach everyone, and we hope that somebody will succeed in the end and be able to pass the Torah. The parables taught in Rabbeinu Yonah here about one time they said, can all the students of Hillel come forward? And they did, except one supposedly was missing, and they said only the smallest of the students, and famously the smallest of Hillel's students was Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, one of the greatest rabbis of all time. And so just to say that, look, you might think that Hillel's way might not work in this regard and might not actually create good students, but that's actually not true. It at least worked for Hillel, right? And I think that's important, and only works that way, of course, when you act like Hillel is. But I think it's an important dialogue that continues on in terms of how we multiply students, and really both values should be taken into account when making decisions like this. Lastly, make offense for the Torah, as Pirkei Avot says. And he first says what Rambam says, that you should make a guard for your guarding, right? That there's actually a mitzvah to make a fences around the Torah. But then he actually delves deeper into the psychological understanding of like what actually is going on here in terms of our relationship to Hashem. He talks about the great need for us to have awe and fear around the doing of commandments, right? It's one thing to want to do the commandments, but it's not that God doesn't want us just to want to do the commandments, but also to have fear and to have be upset when we don't do the commandments. And in order to express this fear and awe of being careful not to violate the commandments, what needs to happen and the way we express that actually is by creating fences around the Torah itself. Extrajudicial rules to make sure that we don't actually violate the mitzvot. That shows to God that, like, look how much we care about doing the mitzvot. We make these fences and rules so that we don't actually violate we don't come to actually even come close to the violation of the rules. When God sees this, God sees that we care deeply about Hashem, and I think the word fear obviously gets a bad name here, but I think what we probably mean here is awe, or take it with seriousness. This is not some kind of hobby that we do, but it's something that's extremely serious that we take account of. He then speaks about the problem of violating fences, right? And the person who thinks they can violate fences, in the end will fail. And in the end, even if you are a person who can violate fences, number one, it's obviously a rabbinic commandment, and we're punished, we're not punished anymore, but where it is considered a transgression to violate the words of the rabbis. But it's also an issue in terms of the fact that you will eventually come to violate these laws themselves. And from the outset, as Rabbeinu Yonah says, there is something transgressive in not doing the fences at all, because it changes the way in which we relate to Hashem, which of course is really important in the end. It's not just like doing the mitzvot, but also in the way in which we relate and build a relationship with God.
Well, that's it for today, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to the Daily Derech. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to email me anytime at rmr@templeofaaron.org. Thank you so much for listening. There are so many people to thank, and you can look in the show notes for that. And also, if you want to know and see any of these texts in the original, we actually have that too. You can actually find that in our episode description. So look in each of the episode descriptions, and you'll find that information right there. Thank you very much. Have a great day, everybody.